Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. This kicks off our edition of Featured Pros Live. We've got a full house today on the Lit software side. I'm Hillary Hames. I'm the VP of Enterprise Relationships. I work with our law firms very closely, and I'm joined by Andrea Burton, our Chief Customer Officer, who is responsible for Lit Suite Academy, our courses dedicated to successful user adoption. Sitting on the sidelines today and recovering from a bit of a cough, we've got Tara Cheever, our co-founder and the visionary behind our products. She's going to be taking questions from the chat, so please feel free to submit those, and we'll attempt to address those as they roll in. Just a quick reminder, we're recording this session, and I will send you the recording tomorrow morning, along with some very helpful links. In the past, if you've joined us, our weekly webcasts really focused on what Lit Suite can do and how our customers typically get started in our apps. So we walked through features and functionality and typical workflows, best practices. Featured Pros Live is different. So instead of us talking about the software, we're going to host real litigators and let them share their experiences in their own words, real cases with real outcomes, because there's really no testimony more authentic and compelling than the testimony coming straight from your peers. So today we're going to be talking with one trial lawyer who says Lit Suite has fundamentally restructured how he practices law. Joining us today is Ian Richardson, a civil trial lawyer who devotes his practice to representing plaintiffs in sexual abuse cases and serious personal injury matters, as well as representing businesses in high-stakes litigation throughout North Carolina. He uses all the Lit Suite apps, not just TrialPad, on a daily basis, and believes that the combination of Lit Suite and AI is effectively eliminating the need for entire categories of third-party vendors that trial lawyers have relied on for decades. So, Ian, thank you so much for being here. Set the stage for us. What does your practice look like? Tell us about the types of cases you're handling and what's usually at stake for your clients.
Sure. So I have kind of an interesting practice in that some days I'm representing businesses and anything from complicated collections matters to construction to representing people, individuals in personal injury cases, with an emphasis on representing children who have been sexually abused. And, that takes me all over North Carolina. It also takes me all over the country for some of the abuse cases, usually because it's somewhat of a specialized practice. We'll get hired because we've tried a lot of those cases, and they'll ask us to come in because of some of our expertise there.
Yeah. Wow, that's very serious stuff. Take us back to before you adopted Lit Suite and before AI became part of your workflow. How did you organize yourself so that your cases were always trial ready? What parts of that model felt like the most tedious or risky as the trial approached?
Sure. So I started practicing back in 2014, and everything was just heavy paper based. The first case I ever really worked on, the complaint was thousands of pages long. We were hired to defend it, and all of that was in paper. So we just had binder after binder after binder, and it became just incredibly cumbersome. Then I remember the first case that I actually tried in a superior court in North Carolina. It was a construction case. We were representing the construction company who didn't get paid, and I've got a picture somewhere that I need to send you guys, but we had a hand truck, one of the ones that goes flat, and it probably had 9 banker's boxes on it. We wheeled it over to the Durham County Courthouse, and we're wheeling it in. One of the bailiffs says, "Well, that looks civil." And I just remember, a few things about that. First, the case got called for trial 3 times before we actually were able to try it. So I had to haul all that stuff over 3 different times. And I just kind of started to realize that there has to be a better way than all this paper.
Yeah, so at one point you were considering yourself a boards guy, and I assume that this completely fell apart at that moment.
So foam boards, I think, have their place, even when you do a mostly digital presentation. Every now and again, there's just something useful about a foam board, but trying to present an entire case with foam boards is just first of all, it's really, really expensive. And then second of all, it's just not as dynamic of a presentation as what we can do with TrialPad or just any of the Lit Suite.
So it was that early 2021 Wake County trial that forced the change. Wake County reopens jury trials and suddenly you're first on the docket. What happened? What was going on in your head? And how are you using and relying on TrialPad?
Yeah, so back in 2021, it's sort of everyone's coming out of COVID. We didn't have a civil jury trial in North Carolina or in Wake County for something like a year and a half. And right around August, the first part of August 2021, we get an email from our trial court coordinator that says, your case is first up for trial, I think the week of August 21st or something like that. And we're like, okay, that is news to us because we were just sort of getting a jury trial resumption plan. And we knew that we didn't have enough time to get a whole bunch of foam boards printed. And they were just we had to figure out a way we were going to present the case and just take the information we had on that case and get it into a way that we could easily show it to a jury. So I had already downloaded, I primarily downloaded TrialPad, but I never used it for anything. So I said, yeah, I've got the software. Let me drop these documents in and just see what it looks like. And it was incredibly easy to get it all loaded in. And we had an Apple TV in the office. So I connected it and started presenting. I'm like, well, that looks pretty good. So our problem at that point is we didn't really have any infrastructure in Wake County in the courtroom to present. They had like a TV from the 1990s. So I had to go and buy monitors and TVs and stuff, which was fine. So we ended up bringing all that in and then connected that into the TrialPad system.
Well, in that case ended in a $3.4 million verdict. So I assume Wake County isn't really known for those seven-figure verdicts. What did that tell you about how the juries and the judges responded to that type of presentation?
Yeah, so Wake County is not known to be a plaintiff-friendly jurisdiction. We'll get plaintiff's verdicts fairly regularly, but it's just not any of the good-sized plaintiff verdicts. So I think we had a couple of things going for us in that case. We had really horrible facts, but also the presentation was just, it went really, really well. We had a whole lot of child protective services reports in that case that we were able to get into evidence and then use and just call out specific things that it just told a story to the jury that I suppose we maybe, if time was not an issue, could have told the same story in foam boards, but it was so easy, and especially these defendants, they just wanted to lie. So we just kept hitting them with the documents that contradicted their lies, and that part was huge. The judge really liked the software that we were using. The jury just kind of lapped it up. And from that point forward, I was hooked. We talked to some of them afterwards, and it's we lose a fair amount of cases because we tried difficult cases. But one thing that from kind of that point on, we always get a lot of style points because the software just really it helps. So even if we don't win the case, they're always impressed with the way that we present the case.
Thanks for always being out there and advocating for us. We started talking about TrialPad, but let's walk it back a little bit because we don't want to neglect our other apps. You said that between Lit Suite and AI, your need for e-discovery vendors has dropped dramatically, which is huge. Walk us through how DocReviewPad fits into that.
Yeah, so I use DocReviewPad kind of two different ways. I use it almost exclusively now, and my paralegals really like this because they don't have to worry about Bates numbering or anything. But I do it DocReviewPad for all of our document productions where we're reviewing and sending documents out. So that it saves a whole lot of time, both my time and paralegal time on the processing. I'm working on a production right now in a car accident case that's not all that complicated, but the client will email me a document and then I can literally just drag and drop it over into our kind of our working production file, which is incredibly efficient. We don't have to do a whole lot of additional work in that regard. It gets Bates numbered and it's just there waiting to be produced. The other way that I use DocReviewPad is we often, especially in our construction cases, will get tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of documents dumped on us. So we'll put that in DocReviewPad and we'll start running searches. We'll start looking for, kind of the hot docs, so to speak, and getting things coded. We'll code it by individuals so that if we know we've got depositions coming up, all we've got to do if we want to get exhibits ready for a deposition is just run a search, run a report, and we'll know what we're looking for.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about the Maryland trial that we discussed in our former interview, specifically how DocReviewPad reports helped resolve a discovery dispute with a judge.
Yeah, so in that trial, we had been up. So again, I'm in Raleigh. We were helping with a case up in Maryland. We'd been up for a pretrial conference a couple of weeks before the case got called for trial. And the judge was very clear with everybody, you need to exchange your exhibits by a certain date. And we did that. The other side didn't give us the exhibits by the date they were supposed to. And then when they finally gave us their quote unquote exhibits, it was something like 30 or 32 gigabytes of data. And, we had no idea what it was. We're here trying to get ready for trial, and their alleged exhibits don't have, they might have exhibit stickers on them, but they were from depositions and all sorts of things. So I was able to put all that in DocReviewPad and then just run a report, which the report itself, I think I printed it off. It was like 2 inches thick, just to show the judge, here are the supposed exhibits from the other side. And it was really helpful to show that, we've got to do a little better than this if we're going to have any kind of an organized trial, because if those are the exhibits, we're looking through 300 pages of document titles to try to figure out, all right, what is this exhibit? So the judge ultimately saw that. He's like, yeah, those are not your exhibits. Those are just the documents in the case. You need to tell us what your exhibits are.
Wow. That's great stuff. Can we talk a little bit, and just due to time, touch on TranscriptPad? So, when most litigators think about our solutions, they typically lean into the flagship product, TrialPad. But you think that TranscriptPad might actually be your most important. Why would you say that is?
Yeah, so we take a lot of depositions at our firm, and it's not uncommon. Like that case in Maryland, I think it had something like 70 depositions. Not all of our cases have that many, but even if you've got 4 or 5 depositions, just figuring out a way that is not printing out the deposition and highlighting it, flagging it, it's incredibly useful to be able to read the deposition, code it with whatever the issues are, and then run reports. So that's the biggest thing that I use TranscriptPad for on a daily basis. I may be getting ready for a hearing, and I know there's some issue that's coming up, so I'll just go to the deposition transcript and run a report in order to pull out whatever information we need. The other thing that I think is going to put a lot of the trial vendors out of business is being able to sync the transcript to the video and then clip that on my own. That was something that I've paid just gobs of money to vendors for in the past, and now I can do it sitting at home in an evening.
Yeah, I used to work for a court reporting vendor, and I believe that we were charging $75 to $150 per video hour for the sync. So just being able to do that in TranscriptPad without the vendor's help is all of the value of the world is right there.
Yeah, they
How much?
charge $150 an hour if you want to just cut a little piece of it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And you mentioned that you can review 3 transcripts in the same time that it took you to review one.
Yeah, at
What does
least.
that do to the reliance on deposition summaries?
You mean like an AI summary? I've never been a big fan of the AI summary because whenever they first came out, I noticed that they were just sort of missing things that were important to me. So I certainly don't pay for AI summaries. If one comes with transcript, that's fine. But I'd much rather just read the deposition. And I kind of, especially if I took the deposition, I know where some of the more juicy stuff is going to be in the transcript, so I can get there a little faster and just get things coded the way I want it to be.
Yeah, but you used to travel with suitcases full of transcripts. I assume that TranscriptPad has really changed the way you travel, and it's probably lightened your load quite a bit.
Yeah, we not just transcripts, the exhibits. We were either having them shipped by the court reporter, or we would carry them in an extra suitcase. And now I can take a deposition with just an iPad, and as long as the conference room has a TV, we can just kind of show them the exhibits without having to worry about any of that, which is very helpful.
Great. So, moving forward, TrialPad was once I guess, the entry point into the Lit Suite, and now you use it everywhere. When does it show up in your day-to-day practice, TrialPad in particular?
So I actually used it this morning for an internal meeting that we had with paralegals. We were going over some just different rules of civil procedure. So I had made a slide deck that I saved as a PDF and stuck it into TrialPad. I've got a meeting this afternoon where some of the opposing parties are coming to my office for a settlement discussion, and I'm going to have documents on TrialPad that we're going to put up on the screen as we talk through them. So that's kind of the day-to-day way that it gets used, but I may be a little bit addicted because I lead a Bible study at my church, and it routinely makes an appearance in church Bible study if I'm showing, videos or thing that might be relevant. So it's not limited just to going into the courtroom.
Wow. Let's talk about AI, the future, and what's left to outsource. So you told us some things that really stuck with us. Between Lexis AI and Lit Suite, the only things that you still outsource are truly time-sensitive jobs like jury consulting. And looking ahead, like as AI continues to improve and integrate more deeply, where do you think this goes?
I can certainly see as AI continues to integrate into everything we do, I can see an ability for us to take all of our documents in DocReviewPad, get them over into TimelinePad, and then TimelinePad will just create kind of a beautiful timeline of everything that happened in the case, and it will be accurate. I don't know if that's a 6-month thing or a 6-year thing, but I think in less than a decade, certainly all that ought to be just things that used to take months and months and hours of attorney time to get right can probably happen in a matter of seconds.
And when you're talking directly with your peers and they're still relying heavily on vendors and outsource prep, like what would you tell them?
It's usually just a question. It's why. I met with our trial consulting vendor the other day for lunch, and I said, look, I love you guys, but realistically, jury consulting is all I think I'm going to need you for going forward, because everything else I can do in-house completely efficiently. It saves my clients money, which I think I've got an obligation to try to look after their money, and it saves me time. So yeah, usually it's just a question of why haven't you adopted these programs, because it's It's incredibly efficient. It makes the entire practice of law easier and just better, and a lot of times more fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned that you have a few people in your office who have a Lit Suite subscription. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're collaborating with your paralegal, with your associates, why it's so important for more than just yourself to have the software?
Yeah. So typically we staff each case with at least 2 lawyers. And if it looks like the case is going to trial fairly soon, or within a week or 2 of the case going to trial for sure, if not a little bit further out than that, we'll all kind of get on the same page in terms of getting our exhibits in a centralized location. That way, we can just, if we're going to assign witnesses or things like that, we're all working out of the exact same set of information, and there's not any confusion, because we can prepare all we want to before we get to the courtroom. But if what I'm doing is different than what my associate's doing, and the associate's going to take a witness, then at some point we got to be able to present the information. So that's why it's important to get everybody on the same page with that. And then with respect to the paralegals just have kind of learned what I want, because they know that I'm loading this information into one of the various pieces of software in the Lit Suite, and I need it in certain forms. So, like transcripts, they know to make sure that I've got them in a format that plays well with TranscriptPad, things like that.
And so this morning we had our internal call at Lit Software, and I just wanted to let everyone know that we have TranscriptPad now for Apple CarPlay. So if you haven't already listened to your transcripts in your car, it's coming, or it may already be here. I'm not 100% sure. I'll get back to you on that. But it's some very, very iPhone rather. It's very exciting stuff that we're developing here, and excited to show you in 2026. Tara, do we have any questions coming in through the chat?
I do have a question about preparation from the office perspective, like what you're doing in conference room with your paralegals. Is that just a meeting? Are you rehearsing with witnesses? And how does the Lit Suite fit into the actual practical part of as you're prepping for the trial with your witnesses and with your team?
So that's a great question. We've done it both ways, and we moved offices a little over a year ago, and my big ask when we moved was just to make sure that every one of our conference rooms had an Apple TV, so that when I go in there, I can just connect my iPad to it over the air. And it's nice, especially when we're prepping a witness, to bring them in. I'll kind of show them what they're going to see in the courtroom. And it's helpful for me because I've already rehearsed some of the call outs, some of the highlights, or whatever we're going to do. But it's also helpful for the witness just to make sure, something as simple as, hey, whenever that document comes up on the screen, it's really hard to read until you zoom in. So just learning little things like that in advance of the trial is helpful. And then also with the team, just having them be able to see kind of what we're doing at the end of the day, some of the end products. It helps as we're developing whatever we're working towards to present in the courtroom.
So when you and when your peers first downloaded our apps, like how did you get trained in those programs? How quick was the learning curve? Tell us a little bit about how you mastered these apps and how long it took.
So it didn't take very long for me. I think the most difficult thing that I had, so I've sort of used both the old version of the Lit Suite and the newer version. The biggest problem that I had, the biggest struggle, was just getting things loaded in to the software to be able to present or review or whatever I was going to do. I think that has just consistently gotten easier over the years. And I'm probably not the the one to ask about how to do it. I have my own little ways that work for me, whether it's to put something on a flash drive and then plug that into my iPad or whatever I do. But there's just a lot of different ways to get the information in. So that was the biggest learning curve that I had, was figuring out what worked with our systems. And I think that'll be a little different for everybody, depending on how you manage your documents, like what your system is for that. But in terms of actually using the software, I think just getting in there and playing with it, I found that kind of interesting and fun. So it didn't take all that long to get the sense of, all right, here's what this does, here's how this works, and here are things to avoid.
So
I have one question in the Q&A. Take me through a short and simple example of the process that you use to review a document in DocReviewPad, and then integrate that into TrialPad with key docs for your presentation. For instance, what issue codes do you use on a regular basis, and how do those play into your presentation with TrialPad? I think that's probably the part to focus on, is issue code organization.
Yeah. So when I think about a case, and I think everybody thinks about it a little bit differently, but I tend to think about it first from the standpoint of who are the people, who are the witnesses, because that's kind of how I'm going to use the document. So I can have all the issue codes in the world, and I've been guilty in the past of having so many issue codes that it almost gets to a point of fatigue, because like there's so much coding that it becomes useless. So I'll often do it as simple as just coding by witness. And once I've got the documents isolated to, all right, here are the documents I'm going to use with John Smith, I'll export those to TrialPad. I have a folder for each witness. Once I've got all my documents in TrialPad, I'll get everything labeled with an exhibit sticker, and then I might make subfolders with those exhibits in TrialPad to work with that particular witness. So that's what's worked for me, is just thinking about it in terms of the witness as opposed to a particular issue code. I think the flip side of that, though, is if you're not going to trial, if you've got a hearing coming up, you may have documents that are really important for some particular point of law. You know, it could be contributory negligence or whatever. We have that in North Carolina. So we may have documents that tend to support or cut against that, and we'll code for that issue and then use those with the brief. But we still may export that issue to TrialPad if we know that's going to be the big issue at a hearing. I hope that answers the question.
Do you see the follow-up, Hillary, in the Q&A? I don't want to repeat it if you see it.
No, please go ahead.
So this is from Mike again. So you typically put the witness name as issue codes. That seems to be very practical. He's also buried himself in issue codes and found it to be very confusing and difficult to utilize. So witness names would be or by witness is what you would do your issue codes as.
Yeah, that's typically what I'll do. And, you know, you can do the different colors. So if for some reason you wanted to get a little more granular than just by witness, I think you could probably figure out a way to code certain things a different color. And maybe I'm thinking more for TranscriptPad here, but there's potentially a chance that if you need to get a little more granular than just by the person, using the different colors that are available could help.
I would also add that if you have things in folders, I'll bring my face back. If you have things in folders, then that can also help you create some different subsets of your documents. So then you can run a report on just one set of documents and pull out from certain issue codes. So you can kind of play around with that as well, potentially in both DocReviewPad and TranscriptPad, play around with some of that structure. And then one more question that we had was about your tech stack. So what are you bringing with you? Like, what are you using in your office? What are you using mobily? Kind of what are you working with? Devices, extras, what's in your toolkit?
It's really simple, and for the case in Maryland, I think it shocked the judge a little bit. I use an iPad with the keyboard case. I use an Apple Pencil, and then I use an Apple TV and an extension cord. That's about it. I think I've got one of the little USB-C dongles that may have an HDMI cord input and a few USB slots. That's really it. But we thought we were going to need to spend a lot more time in that case up in Maryland, kind of testing tech, bringing tech in. We had hauled up all these monitors and stuff from North Carolina, but we ended up, they had decent technology in the courtroom. So after the trial was over, the judge looked at me and he's like, well, do you need a day or so to come in and get all your tech out? And I just sort of held up the Apple TV and a power strip, and I said, nope, we got it. And
it can all be in your briefcase quite easily.
It can. It's so they're, I think, simple is best in most things, especially in trial. I've tried to do things super complicated. And one of my colleagues circulated, he went to a CLE, and one of the lawyers presenting had provided this kind of checklist of all the stuff that they take to trial. And I'm like, you don't need to set up your entire, if you have to set up your entire office when you're trying a case, the case may not be ready for trial. I get wanting to have all your post-it notes and paper clips and all that stuff, but sometimes just having simple technology that works is all you need, and that's why I love TrialPad in particular so much. It simplifies my life.
You mentioned an Apple Pencil. I'm assuming you've maybe had it for a while, I'm not sure, but have you used it with DocReviewPad with how the Apple Pencil is now integrated in there?
I've only used it for like redacting and things like that. I haven't done anything. And I've also got a slightly older Apple Pencil I learned the other day. Apparently there's a new version, but I'm running.
They do that.
20.
Well, with DocReviewPad, with the Apple Pencil, you now have the markup. So there's the regular pen and highlight, and then there's the little symbol that gets you into the Apple Pencil tools. And so we like that you can use the pen and the highlight for more trial ready annotations. And then the little markup lets you do more of like your handwritten personal notes, and then those export separately. So you can decide to bring your pen, but the regular annotation pen, or you can leave all those off and just have a personal set of notes from your documents with those. So they export nicely and separately. So I wasn't sure if you had tried that out yet.
I have not. That sounds interesting.
And I would say it's also coming to TrialPad as well. So just a little bit more of the different types of tools that you have that come with Apple Pencil through the iPad, like a crayon. You have that as well. And I did want to ask one other question without you giving away any information. Do you feel like you've had the coolest call out, highlight, combo, split screen? Like, what's been your biggest way to use TrialPad to make a great example? Do you find it's the call outs, the highlights? Have you had like a really cool one where you're like, oh, I couldn't have done this on a board?
So I'm not sure if you've ever read like a CPS report or something like that. It's basically a police report. You get a whole wall of text that's like single spaced, 8-point, and sometimes there's really important stuff in there, but it's buried in all this other stuff. So that's probably the coolest for like highlighting and calling out. But I absolutely love the comparing two documents or having two documents side by side, because the reality is, my wife doesn't believe this, people lie. They lie all the time. And I think whenever you have those, the ability just to show like what they said in one place, what they said in another, just the image of that is super powerful. We've got another case. It's kind of a silly case that's getting ready to go to trial, but there's this fight over two different versions of a contract. Now, the person signed both of them, and for what matters, they say the same thing, but we plan to use compare two documents to show that, because it shows exactly kind of what are we even really talking about here. They're the same thing.
I can kind of imagine that sort of like evil in a good way chuckle you might make when you go, oh, I'm going to put this as two documents next to each other. I already know exactly what I'm going to call out. I can just sort of see you go, I know exactly the tool for this part.
Yep.
That has to be sort of a cool way, like I already know exactly how I'm going to display this. Hillary, did you have, I know I interrupted you to ask about.
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask you, this is my own question, but Ian, have you ever loaded up multiple iPads and distributed them to the jurors so that they can review like evidence without having to share binders or paper? This would be like part of ExhibitsPad.
So I played around with it a little bit, and we kicked around the idea of having all the jurors the separate iPad up in Maryland. It's never really worked out for me, and we have some kind of, I'm not going to call them strange, we just have different rules here in North Carolina about what exactly jurors can have and not have, and I've just not really had a good case where having all the jurors set up with an iPad would work. I could envision some cases where that would work, but I think it would take the right case, the right judge, frankly, the right jurors, because I could envision an older juror who really doesn't want anything to do with an iPad. So that's why I've found I've had the best luck just having a big screen, whether I bring it in or whether the court has it, that I can show the jurors the exhibits. And I also feel like I have a little more control that way. So I think ExhibitsPad is really cool. I just haven't really had a good case for it yet.
I will say we just updated it, so take a look at it. And we updated it with the mindset of Jitterbug, the phone for our grandparents.
Yes.
So it does not have similar styling in a lot of ways to the rest of our apps, because it's definitely designed to be Jitterbug, related. I shouldn't say they're, another company's name, but we tried to really make sure it was designed so that no matter who's in your jury, that they could at least feel very confident navigating through documents. There's little icon, there aren't a lot of icons, a lot of big words on there just for that use. But thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think if you're in North Carolina, jurors don't automatically get to take the exhibits back to the jury room. I think if you're in a jurisdiction where they all go back automatically, it has a lot more use. That's just not the way we do it here. A lot of times, if they want to see a video or something, they have to come back out of the courtroom and watch it.
Okay,
having that back,
then that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for being here. I think we have actually one more question. Do you use the apps in remote settings?
Like outside of your office, do you ever work, outside of your office, outside of a courtroom, or over Zoom? Maybe that's a good example. Do you ever do anything over Zoom or any web platform?
I've definitely taken some Zoom depositions where I run TrialPad. There's a couple, I think there may be, or at one point there was an extra app you had to really make it work. But I've for sure used TrialPad over Zoom, and I think it works well for remote depositions.
Yeah, Zoom is most friendly for Lit Suite. I think what you're referring to is that now you can AirPlay directly to the whereas before you needed like a third party to be able to AirPlay your iPad, I think is maybe what you're referring to. Yeah, which is still the case for like Teams, WebEx. Those are not iPad friendly yet, but that's where the Mac makes it very easy if you get the Mac version.
Yeah.
And how did you feel that went? And were you just as confident presenting or using TrialPad remotely as you were, in a traditional courtroom?
Not quite as confident, because I was at the time running that third-party app, and it just getting the size of the text right so that the other party can see it. And you don't know what size screen they're looking on. I've deposed people that they're sitting there on their iPhone, and it really kind of. I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong in that setting. unless you've got like an agreement that they're going to their lawyer's office and their lawyer's going to have proper technology for them to actually participate on. But you just never know what you're going to get at a remote deposition. So that would be my only real hesitation. But
I could see that in a deposition situation, sure.
yeah.
I just wanted to note that we had a couple questions here on billing stuff, and just in terms of the syncing and editing, that's included with your LitSuite subscription. I know, Ian, you already know that, and you use that. In terms of if you have a subscription for your iPad of the LitSuite, you automatically are able to download and use any of the apps that are available for Mac and any of the apps that are available for iPhone. So in terms of the Mac, TrialPad, TranscriptPad, DocReviewPad, and TimelinePad are available. For iPhone, we just have TranscriptPad available, and that is more of a companion app. It will allow you to play the deposition, and our thought process behind it was for lawyers that are on the go, and they just need to be able to have the deposition either read to them, or you can play the synced video on the iPhone app. And it has a new feature called marked lines, so that you can be literally running on a treadmill listening to it, and just with a double tap on the screen, you'll mark the question and answer that you've just heard, and then you'll be able to go back to that later and add those issue codes, and sort of as a way of being able to highlight all of the most important stuff, wherever you are, and then when you get back to a place where you can sit down and open up your iPad, you can start applying all the different issue codes. But just in terms of the billing, what we've been talking about today, there's no extra charge for any of it. It's all included with your LitSuite subscription.
Yeah, and no pressure on our development team, but Ian, I'll ask you the magic wand question. So if you had one and you could add one feature to the LitSuite that doesn't necessarily exist today, what would it be and how would it change the way you do things?
That's a great question. For me, I'm still looking for the best timeline tool, and a timeline tool that I don't have to input a lot of data points into. So if I could just load documents in and then all of a sudden a timeline come out, that would be incredibly helpful for me, because often the timeline is that's what the whole case is about.
Understood.
Ian, do you not know that we have TimelinePad now?
Yeah, and I played around with it, and it's
I'll get you a training. I'll get you a training and show you how quick it could be to make your timeline.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. It has been a little bit cumbersome for me, if I can be honest. But
well, then your feedback would be great too, because we pride ourselves on having tools that are easy to use, and as you know, so that maybe we can connect. And if you have any feedback on that of some features you'd love to see in TimelinePad, we can talk about that too, or what your hiccups are, because that'd be you're one of our top guys.
I don't know if you've played around with like Lexis AI or anything, but I can load 15 documents in there, and it sort of spits out a timeline, but it's just not pretty. So figuring out a way to sync that with TimelinePad would be super helpful.
Okay, good to know. Back to you, Hillary.
Yeah, any closing remarks, Ian, before we wrap up our call?
I don't think so. I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity. It's I love the software. I love telling people about it, and it makes me happy whenever opposing counsel decides to pick it up. I think it makes everybody's life easier if we're all sort of presenting the same way, and then at the end of the day, the jury gets to decide the case based on the actual facts, not just the presentation software.
Absolutely. And preparation is critical for presentation. So always good to start preparing as soon as the case is onboarded. So thanks, Ian, so much. And for the rest of our audience, we hope that you'll join us again next week. Our guest will be Adam Davis, a mariner turned maritime litigator who represents plaintiffs against some of the largest defense firms in Louisiana and Texas. So we're excited to learn how he's using LitSuite to reel in the big jury verdicts. And like I said, I will send you the call recording tomorrow with some helpful links, some links to LitSuite Academy, so that you can get some training from Andrea and her team. She does a lot of really amazing things. helping you deep dive into some of these apps that may not be quite so familiar and making you power users. She can help you if you wanted to train your team. She could help you train, and we have the train the trainer model. So please definitely get in touch with us and take advantage of all of our training opportunities. And I think that'll be it, Tara, unless you and Andrea have anything else coming into the chat. We can wrap this up and talk again next week.
Thank you so much, Ian. Appreciate you so much for your time and your wisdom, and hearing you talk about LitSuite's lots of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.